The spacious office of the car dealership, a business-like atmosphere prevailed. Victoria was carefully reviewing the sales reports for the last quarter. The numbers were pleasing. Growth had reached almost 40% compared to the previous year. Vika allowed herself a few seconds to savor her success. 3 years ago, many had doubted that she could handle it. That was when her father had just handed over the reins to her. Some managers even quit, unwilling to work under a 27-year-old woman. Her assistant peeked into the office. "Victoria Andreevna, there's a client asking about that new model." "I'll be right there." Victoria adjusted her perfectly pressed suit and stepped into the showroom. A tall man stood near a brand-new premium SUV, scrutinizing the wheel rims. Victoria immediately recognized an expert. Clients like these always paid attention to details. "Good afternoon, can I help you?" She greeted him with a friendly smile. The man turned around, his eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise. Victoria knew that reaction well. Customers often didn't expect to see a young woman as the dealership's director. But the stranger smiled back. "Hello, Dmitri. I'm interested in the new model. I'd like to know more about the configuration." The next half hour flew by unnoticed. Victoria enjoyed discussing the car's technical specifications, answering questions, and noticing how the look in Dimitri's eyes changed, from mild skepticism to genuine interest and respect. In the end, Dimitri shook his head. "Honestly, I didn't expect this. You know more about cars than I do. I'm impressed." "Thank you," Victoria shrugged. "I believe a leader should know their product inside and out." "How about a cup of coffee?" Dimitri asked unexpectedly. "I promise I won't ask any more questions about horsepower and torque." Victoria hesitated. She usually didn't mix work with her personal life, but something about Dimitri's smile was disarming. That's how their romance began. Dimitri turned out to be exactly the kind of man every woman dreams of: attentive, caring, a good listener. He admired her success, supported her in difficult moments, and never pressured her. When Victoria stayed late over reports, he would simply say, "You're amazing. Most women your age only think about parties and shopping, and here you are running a business." Soon they got married. The wedding was modest, just close friends and family. Victoria deliberately took only a week for their honeymoon. She didn't want to leave the dealership unattended. That was the first time she noticed her future mother-in-law, Elena Pavlovna, frown at this decision. "Sweetheart, is work really more important than family happiness?" The woman pursed her lips. But Victoria didn't think much of it. The first months of marriage were smooth. Dimitri, who worked at a construction company, often stayed late, just like Victoria. They understood each other's busy schedules and never fought over late nights. But gradually, things began to change. Elena Pavlovna started visiting more frequently, at first under the pretense of helping the young wife, then just to check in. And every visit came with remarks. "Dima, you've gotten so thin," she'd sigh. "Your wife doesn't have time to cook, always stuck in that dealership." Victoria clenched her teeth but remained silent. After all, this was Dimitri's mother. She had to show respect. But the remarks became sharper. "At your age, I was already raising 2 children," Elena Pavlovna would say, pouring tea. "And you're still busy with cars. Is that really a woman's job?" At first, Dimitri defended his wife, but gradually his stance began to shift. "Maybe Mom is right," he asked one evening when Victoria came home after 10 p.m. "You're not taking care of yourself." "I have an important deal coming up," Victoria replied tiredly. 3 new dealership contracts. It's a breakthrough for our business." "That's exactly the point." Dimitri sat down beside her. "You're taking on too much. You need help." "I have a great team." "That's not what I mean," he interrupted. "You need someone to take on part of the management responsibilities." "I could—" Victoria froze. There it was, the thing she had subconsciously feared all along. "Dimitri, my father built this business. He trusted me with it, and I'm managing just fine." But can't you see how it's affecting our family? Dimitri's voice grew firm. We hardly see each other, you're always exhausted, and it's time we thought about children. What do children have to do with this? Victoria stood up. I want kids, but not at the cost of giving up my life's work. See? Dimitri got up too. You yourself admit it's your life's work. What about me? What about our family? I don't understand why I have to choose, Victoria said quietly. Why can't I have both? Because it's impossible. Dimitri started pacing. Look at yourself. You live for your job. I want a normal family where my wife greets me with dinner, not sales reports. You knew who you were marrying, Victoria snapped. She looked at her husband and barely recognized him. Where was the supportive, understanding man she had fallen in love with? Had it all been an act? You know what? She said slowly. Let's revisit this conversation later. We're both tired right now. Dimitri nodded, but his eyes made it clear the conversation wasn't over. The next day, Elena Pavlovna invited them to a family dinner. Victoria tried to decline, citing work, but her mother-in-law was insistent. Sweetheart, this is important, she said in a tone that didn't allow objections. We need to discuss your future. At the dinner table, Victoria absent-mindedly stirred her tea. Elena Pavlovna sat across from her, casting meaningful glances at her son. Dimitri sat beside his mother, as if taking her side in an invisible battle. Dear, Dimitri and I have been thinking a lot. Elena Pavlovna dabbed her lips with a napkin. You really do need help managing the dealership. It's such a big responsibility. Victoria tensed, sensing a trap. And we have a great solution, Elena Pavlovna continued with a smile. You know our Anton, right? Dimitri always said his brother was a natural leader. Anton? Victoria looked at her husband in surprise. What does he have to do with this? My brother just left his job. Dimitri avoided her gaze. Well, technically, he was laid off during a company restructuring. A great specialist is now unemployed, Elena Pavlovna chimed in. And he could be your deputy, with his management experience. What experience? Victoria interrupted. Anton was a manager in a construction company. He has no background in the car business. But he has the right instincts. Elena Pavlovna raised her voice. He's a man. He understands how to lead. And you could focus more on your family, your home. This is a family business, Victoria said firmly, but not your family's. My father entrusted it to me. That was the moment everything clicked. The constant talks about children, the subtle hints that she needed help. Dimitri's sudden involvement in dealership matters. No, Victoria said calmly. This isn't up for discussion. A few weeks later, after another attempt to push Anton into her business, Victoria had had enough. We decided that from next month, Anton will run the dealership, Dimitri said casually over dinner. Victoria snapped. Have you all lost your minds? Dimitri stared at her, stunned. Get out of my house. Now, a month later, Victoria stood before her dealership, looking at the new golden-lettered sign. Her business, her rules, she had won.